Have you ever struggled with the concept of faith? I have. I remember sitting in the back of an empty church on a warm Washington summer morning. And I was sitting there in a church that would be filled with hundreds of people just the next day. The sunlight was streaming through the stained glass windows, and the cool air was coming off the hard wooden pews. And I was excited because my dad was going to take me fishing. And so my mom had dropped me off right in the back of the church, and my dad was at the front preparing for his sermon the next day. And I always was inspired to see my dad talk, but this was the first time I experienced him getting ready for his speech, getting ready for the presentation the next day. It's one of the most vivid memories I have of my father. Now, my father, pictured here with my mother and my now 11-year-old son, Tristan, was a minister for about 60 years before he passed away on March 13th, 2012. And during that time, he inspired a lot of people. I remember being on those hard wooden pews every Sunday, hearing a lot of topics and a lot of sermons. My dad was a very animated speaker. He knew how to make topics come alive. He knew how to make a topic very interesting so that you could grasp it, understand it, feel it. In fact, he had quite a reputation because of his presentation style, because of the way he brought the message forward. He was invited to scores of countries, and he went to basically every state in the United States. He was very forward-thinking. Way before PowerPoint, he was animating his own slides. He had an overhead, and he had overhead transparencies. He would hand draw these. And then to animate things, he would cut up transparencies and make his own bullet points that he would flip onto the transparency overhead so that he could make every point as he said them. And he spoke on lots of topics, but faith was probably the most complex. I mean, you hear things like, faith is the evidence of things not seen. Faith without works is dead. If you have faith the size of a mustard seed, and these are complex topics. I mean, these were topics that rattled around in my young brain as I was trying to figure them out and trying to understand them. And the fact of the matter is, my dad was a man of faith, and I was always a man of science. I loved math. I loved science. I grew up to be a computer programmer. I loved the facts, the data, the logic. All of that type of stuff really thrilled me. So this concept that faith and science are at odds, it always perplexed me. And I wondered about that, and I looked at that, and I researched that, and I really studied that because I wonder, are faith and science really opposed? What if science shows the need for faith? What if science shows how valuable faith is? And what if science shows how faith can supercharge your life? In the next few minutes, I want to share with you 3 stories, 5 strategic tools, and 4 steps. 3 stories to show the value of faith, 5 strategic tools to help you improve your faith, and 4 steps to help you activate your faith. And so we will start with 3 stories that show the value of faith. 3 stories that show you how faith can make a difference. 3 stories that highlight the possibilities that faith gives you. And to start that out, I want to talk about David Gregory. Now, last year I did a seminar here at the Queensbury Hotel. And at that time, I was doing something on health and wellness, so I met David Gregory. And we talked. We talked about his situation because a decade before we talked, he started having hearing loss. And he went to his doctor. And his doctor said, it's an ear infection. Gave him something to take care of it, sent him home. But it didn't get fixed. So, over time, he started having headaches in addition. He went to his doctor. They did a CT scan. Didn't find anything. He sent him on his way. It didn't go away. So then, they did an MRI, and they found bleeding in his skull. And they were very concerned. They immediately got him to the point where they could drill and relieve the pressure in his skull. 30 days later, he couldn't walk. Now, how much faith would you have at that point? The people that you're supposed to rely on, the people that you're supposed to believe can help you out with something when you have a medical issue, they have no idea what's going on. And as life goes on, your life is deteriorating right before your eyes. I would think faith would be extremely hard to come by at that point. Because we all want control. We all want to have that ability to have life go our way. But life doesn't bend to us. I remember being in my father's yard in Cleveland, Tennessee. And he had these huge, majestic pines that shot up. They shot up from the ground all the way up to the sky. And there was one year that there was a big snowstorm there. I believe we'd call it a dusting. But it was this big snowstorm that really tested these trees that didn't have this experience of any weight of snow. And there were trees that tried to stand firm and stand tall, and they cracked under the pressure. And there were other trees that found the way to work with the wind and be flexible and pliable, and they survived. We can try to make life go our way. We can try to have control, but what control is a fear that we cannot handle things. If we can instead have faith that no matter what comes our way, we can handle it, we can be more flexible and more pliable as life goes on. I saw an interesting movie the other day, After Earth. Crazy premise. The earth has got so dangerous because of all of these animals have gone awry, so we had to leave. And there's this soldier on this transport, this spaceship, going through space. And he's actually there with his son, his about 12-year-old son. And they're with a lot of other people, but something happens and they crash land on Earth. Now everybody has perished except for the soldier and his son. And the soldier, his legs are broken, he can't go anywhere. But in order for them to survive, they've got to find a piece of the spaceship that's beyond them, that's a ways in the distance. And only his son's able to go because he can't move, his legs are broken. So they can communicate, and as his son's going on this trek, through this dangerous trek, he tells him something. He tells him something that's very important to encourage him. And he says this: fear is not real. The only place that fear exists is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present or may not ever exist. This is near insanity. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. Think about that for a second. Fear isn't real. There's nothing real about fear. We are believing that something's going to happen when we're afraid. Chances are it won't. And even if it does, us believing it's going to happen in a bad way probably isn't going to help the situation out. If we can look at that from a different lens and use faith to believe in better things, we can have freedom from fear. We don't need to be afraid. We don't need to be in control. We can believe that things will work out the right way. Not only does faith give us freedom from fear, but faith gives us freedom from failure. Because for anybody that's very successful knows, failure is simply a step towards success. Failure is not an end. It's not the end game. If we fail at something, we are simply learning something new. We are making our headway toward success. If you think about the leaders in any industry, for instance, Steve Jobs, co-creator of Apple, at some point kicked out of his company, tried to start a couple businesses, went through money like water, was not successful, failure all around. But at some point, Apple was 90 days from bankruptcy. They brought him back, and he turned it around to make Apple one of the most valuable companies in the world. You know the Fortune 500? They just recently made the Fortune 5. That's how much success he had, built on top of failure. Jack Welch, CEO of GE, he at one point blew a roof off a building. I would expect to be fired. He expected to be fired. But he became CEO and made GE's stock price go up 4,000% in his time there. Thomas Edison went through countless iterations of the light bulb before he ever got to a working model. What did he have to say about it? Did he think it was failure? No, he said, I have not failed. I just found 1,000 ways that won't work. Failure is not an end when we have faith. It is simply a step on the road to success. At the end of the day, we can look through that door to the future, and we can believe there's something bad waiting for us. We can believe there's something that is not going to be good, and that we're going to have great difficulties. Or we can look to that door to the future and believe that there is a better life out there, that there is something better we have in front of us. We can choose that fear door, or we can choose the faith door. David Gregory chose the faith door. David Gregory decided he was going to change his life. He gave up smoking. He started exercising. He started eating better. To date, he has been in 75 triathlons. That's 6 to 7 a year. And just to put that in perspective, a triathlon is where you swim, then you ride a bike, then you run. He has done 5 Ironmans. An Ironman is a triathlon where you cover 140 miles in one day, all on your own power. He went from a man who couldn't walk to a man who did 5 Ironmans, and he's still going. Because he looked through that door and he saw a better life. He believed there was something better out there. And because he believed, he was able to do what it took to make it to that point he wanted to be at. If you go up to anybody that's really successful in business and you ask them, what are your goals? They're going to be able to tell you with specificity what their goals are. They will be able to tell you exactly what they are. Because people that are very successful set goals. They know exactly what they're going. And a goal is really a business version of faith. I believe that in 3 years I'm going to accomplish this. And then they do the work to make that happen. That's the type of faith that works in that realm. You know, when everything's going your way, it's really easy to see success. When I finished speaking at the University of Alabama on April 10th of this year, I was absolutely elated. Here I was talking to these brilliant students who were listening to what I had to say. I had spoke with a lot of them just earlier. I mean, future leaders, talking about their successes and their triumphs, and it was great. Just a few hours before, I had given them a presentation on how to build exciting and engaging presentations. And about a third of them had attended that, and it was a lot of fun. What's more, in the months leading up to that, I had been to Fortune 500 campuses up and down the East Coast, and I had been to Georgia Tech. And I also had tickets to Nebraska and London in hand. I had been working out details for Canada and several other states. And I was just absolutely thrilled with the progress I was making. In fact, I even started to have to decline different speaking engagements because I had too many bookings. It was really easy at that point to see success. But 3 years earlier, my story was much different. I was traveling mile after mile through barren stretches of road in a rented U-Haul. I had few possessions even to put in the U-Haul. And I had to make this long 1,000-mile stretch in one day because I couldn't afford a hotel room. It was a long, lonely stretch, and it was accented only by a 3-hour stretch through New Jersey construction. When I arrived, I had no connections. I had no place to live. I was luckily able to find a place, put what little furniture I had in, and I was so thankful for a bed I had to sleep on. At that point, faith was hard to come by. But I knew that if I did the work and I tried and it worked to accomplish what I needed to accomplish, I could be somewhere different. I could be in a better place. And that's what enabled me to do the work. See, life is an interesting roadmap. We like to think that we know exactly where we're going, and that may work in real life, but when we're talking about our lives, we don't know where the destination's going to end up. We can start heading in a particular direction, but we may get rerouted. We may get sent to a different road. There's no telling where we're going to be led. So we've got to be able to move with that and be able to be flexible to move in the right direction. So we heard about David Gregory, and we heard my story. And I told you there were 3 stories, and there are. The third story is your story. What is your story? I want you to think about that for a second. Every good story starts with conflict. You've got to have some sort of struggle at the beginning of a story to really compel the listener. So think for just a second. You should have a piece of paper that you've received. I want you to take just a couple minutes and write down, what is something you're struggling with today? What is something you're having a difficult time with today? This is just for you, but if you want to just take a couple minutes, and we're going to start our story. So think about that. What is a conflict you're dealing with today?